Yo guys, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Bachiru. So in this video I want to discuss my first impression on the Hitbox controller. So one of the very nice members of the community, he actually gifted me a Hitbox for beating the Nago challenge. A full video will come shortly, so make sure you're subscribed for that. Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! We do this, boys! So I've been using this for a week now and I just want to share my first impression. I want to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of using this, and I want to compare it a bit with an arcade stick, which is the controller I've been using for the past 9 years. I just want to draw some comparisons, and at the end of the video, I'll just give you my opinion. Like, as an arcade stick player, is it really worth switching to a Hitbox controller? Okay, now, so we basically now move to the magical camera angle, so don't mind the watermark. I'm using this for one time only. So first things first, I've been using this for a week now. Thank you again, Henry, for gifting this. Let's talk a little bit about what are the immediate advantages that I felt from using a Hitbox controller. The first thing definitely for me is comfort. The thing is with arcade stick controllers is after a while, because you keep moving your wrist a lot, you start to get wrist pain, especially if you've been playing for a long time. For me, I've been playing on an arcade stick for 9 years now, and now my wrist hurts actually. So playing with the Hitbox controller, you don't really need to move your wrist anymore. It's basically just you moving and doing the motions with your fingers. And for me, this feels really comfortable, especially on long playtime sessions. I don't feel as tired as using an arcade stick, especially after a long period of time. The second thing actually, which I immediately felt, is defense. Defense on a Hitbox controller feels so much better than an arcade stick, because you are moving with all your thumbs as opposed to just using your entire hand just to move the lever of the movement of the arcade stick. So you could be crouch blocking, for example, and if you want to stand block, you just let go of the crouch block. And this feels really amazing. And this is one of the most immediate things I felt. Also, when you're doing this and you want to go to a fuzzy jump scenario, defense on a Hitbox controller feels so much solid, and I feel so much confident blocking, for example, like low into a dust, which is something that happens a lot in a game like Guilty Gear Strive. So this feels actually amazing. The other advantage actually is the weight, believe it or not. So this all factors into the comfort section in my opinion. Because the Hitbox controller doesn't really have like the arcade lever mechanism for the joystick itself, it basically means that they can go ham, or they can go free with how light they want to do it, because it's basically just buttons with the switches and the board. So they can go as thin. So for example, this Hitbox controller, as you can see from the top, it's really thin compared to a conventional arcade stick. Shout outs to Megumin at the back. Yeah, so they can really go very light with the Hitbox controller. Or if you like the weight, it's basically the decision of the maker of the Hitbox. They want to make it light and thin. They want to make it big and thick. It's really up to them. And for me, after slugging like a heavy arcade stick for years, it's inconvenient. Carrying a Hitbox controller feels so much easier. The third advantage actually, which something I'm still learning about, is the accessibility to what they call in a Hitbox shortcuts. Somehow, shortcuts. Yeah, so in a regular controller, let me bring my PS5 controller. So in a regular controller, something like this, you cannot really press back and forward at the same time, and you cannot press up and down at the same forward. And also for the arcade stick, since it uses a stick, you cannot really press two motions at the same time. So the nice thing about the Hitbox controller is you can actually press, for example, down at back and front at the same time, down and up at the same time. So with the way that Hitbox controller works, to avoid cheating, what they do is when you press back and front at the same time, it doesn't register anything, which is basically neutral position. But this in return allows you to do like some crazy stuff. So for example, here I'm pressing back and forward. So no movement occurring. So if I let go of the front, I start to move back. So this allows me to do, for example, much quicker back dashes. Or, for example, I can do, as you can see, like almost frame one, like blocking. Even the same thing here. If I want to move, see, I can really have a lot of control over my movement. And if you do down and up at the same time, it registers as up only. But because of how this happens, like you can press 2 motions at the same time and you don't need to draw a motion while you are moving. This allows you to do like some really interesting stuff. I'll just give quick examples because I am still learning a hitbox. So the first thing actually is like air dashing, which is something like when you're playing in a regular controller, you need to press actually like up, then forward to execute it. You can do the same thing in a hitbox controller, like where you can jump and press front twice. But since you can press 2 buttons at the same time, what you can do actually is you can press up and front at the same time, then press front again. So it looks something like this. So as you can see, I can do this. It is fast, but this is so much easier to do. See? Up and front at the same time, front, even for the back, which allows you to do like some really, really fast movement and more precise inputs. And this is, for me, the biggest advantage of Hitbox. This is like the attack buttons, they are the same as an arcade stick. So we're not talking about this part. We're talking about this one, the movement. There's so much flexibility in movement when it comes to Hitbox controllers. And this is why I feel like this is so good, actually. And because of the way that you need to learn how to do the shortcuts, this will allow you to do like some really, really interesting stuff once you get the hang of using this controller. Okay, now let's start to talk about the disadvantages of using a Hitbox controller as opposed to a conventional arcade stick. First things first, this might not be totally a disadvantage, but this is something that you need to keep in mind when you're playing a Hitbox controller. The learning curve on this one is so much more difficult, in my own personal opinion, than going from a controller like this to an arcade stick, than going like from a controller to Hitbox. Even going from an arcade stick to a Hitbox, the learning curve is so much more difficult, actually. And this is, for me, like, don't get excited for seeing people like doing awesome stuff with Hitbox. So you need to know that you have to put the time and effort to learn this. And for the first like few weeks, this will mess with your brain. So let me elaborate. In a regular, let me bring my other arcade stick. Yep. So in a regular fighting game, usually, sorry for the bad camera angle. So you use this lever actually to move. So if you want to go front, you just move it front. You want to go back, up, down, and you use your other hand for the other inputs. So that kind of control scheme is similar to a controller. It's just that you have more control over the analog motions, since the arcade stick, like, it has gates that restrict like when you do a motion. So there's like a feedback when you're trying to do like crouching block or like a dash or something. So when you are learning movement, like going from a controller to an arcade stick, it makes sense. Like, so instead of using like one thumb to move this, you're using your entire hand, but you're still executing the same motions. There's no difference really in the motions that you do. With a hitbox, this is a totally different story. Because in a hitbox, this is back, this is front, so this is left, this is right, this is down. And the biggest thing that you need to conquer and you need to pre-program your mind is this is the jump button. So usually if you're playing on a keyboard, the up is usually like just on top of the down. So it makes sense that when you want to jump, you will press here. But for a hitbox, for their own design purposes, they make the jump here. So when you're playing, you actually need to press the up either with this thumb or your right hand thumb. So this means that you need to readjust your brain. Their reasoning behind this is that like your thumb will fall on this here naturally, and jumping in fighting games naturally is a commitment, because in a traditional 2D fighting game like Street Fighter or like King of Fighters or whatever, you cannot really block in the air. This is not totally relevant in anime fighting games because you can actually just jump and block at the same time. So, but they want you actually to commit when you are jumping actually. And the other thing is that like it's really, really, really difficult to adjust your brain that when you're jumping, you have to press something down. It's like reverse, counterintuitive. But once you learn it, it actually makes sense, and you can start to do actually some really nice stuff. Like, for example, the instant air dash that we talked about earlier. You can actually do it quite easily when you consider this. Actually, also, when you're jumping, you can have more control over your jumps. So this is, in the long run, will become an advantage, but when you first pick up a hitbox controller, you really need to program your mind. The other thing is that it's like the brain of a hitbox controller, in my impression, it's like it's trying to fight its ability to cheat, because you can press actually 2 buttons at the same time. What I understand, like when hitboxes first started, there were like some things that were really cheap on the hitboxes, but they tried to eliminate it. So what they put in here, something, it's called like an SODC cleaner. It means that when you press two buttons at the same time, it cancels them out. Or when you press other two buttons at the same time, only one input will register. This, when you're first learning a hitbox, this will mess up your execution and this will mess up your defense. Why? Let me elaborate. Let's say, for example, your opponent's trying to cross you up. When you're playing in a regular controller, when you want to do like a cross-up defense, for example, you're blocking at the back, you press forward. So there is a motion associated with it. However, when you're playing in a hitbox, maybe you will be crouch blocking. Then you have to go front blocking. So if you look at the joystick below, since I'm pressing the three buttons at the same time, it will register just as crouching. So you cannot just press like the three buttons, then like let go of this. Because there will be a period of time where your controller actually is moving like from the neutral position to the down position because you press left and right at the same time and this cancels the motion. So when you're playing a hitbox and you're guarding like this, you have to do this, see? You have to move your fingers. Otherwise, if you press it at the same time, this will really mess up your execution. The other thing is that when you're doing like half circle motions, if you don't like do the motion properly, like for example, you do this, something like that. So this will really, see, as you can see, it will really mess up your half circle motion. So for example, if I'm Brom Lethal and I need to do, for example, this one, if I don't like piano the motion, like front, down, back, like that, and I try to do it really quickly, there are instances that I can actually mess up the execution because now I'm showing you it will not mess up. As you can see for this kind of instance. So you need to understand the computer, the brain that they put in this hitbox and overcome like the restrictions they put on it so you can actually do like the really nice stuff. So this takes time. The last disadvantage actually is of a hitbox controller, and for me like this is the biggest hindrance that maybe you should not really consider this, or this might not be for you, is that using a hitbox controller, like because you're not really using your entire hand just to do like one motion, like movement, you have to use all of your fingers for movement. And this will require you to develop what we call like middle finger dexterity. Because this middle finger, it depends really on how you like position your fingers on the movement. Most of the time, you'll be using the middle finger here to do like down. And since a game like Guilty Gear has a lot of motions and etc., this will actually require you to develop like the dexterity to press like buttons in a sequence. Because, for example, if you want to do half circle forward, you have to do back, down, front. So you have to do it like in that sequence. However, if you want to do half circle back, you have to do it in reverse. This will mess up with your brain, especially when you're first learning a hitbox controller, because this will require you actually just like to be able to do it like as a pianist. I'm sure that people who play instruments, this is actually pretty easy for them. But for us gamers who don't really use like instruments, we're used actually just to do one motion with one finger or like with the entire hand on an arcade stick. For this one, it will take you time. And I promise you, if you're used like you master playing on like for example on a player one side, once you go to player two side, it's a whole learning experience on the other hand. Because for example, in player one side, in my own experience, doing a DP quite easily. It's very easy actually, which is front, down, front. So if I do it here, it will come out 100% of the time. However, if I switch to the player two side, as you can see, I am much smaller, like I'm much slower, and actually I tend to mess up the input because I haven't developed like the dexterity of the middle finger to move it properly. So I end up messing my DP in player two side most of the time. However, here, as you can see, it's quite easy. Even the same thing like for reverse fireball. So here, as you can see, I'm really slow when I'm trying to do it. However, when I do it in the player two side, it's so easy. So this is something to consider in mind. So as you can see, I still struggling until now actually just to do DP motions. The same thing actually for what do we call it, double quarter circle forward. So on player one side, it's so easy for me to do a mortobato. So quick, even from like crouching block. So if I do this, quite easily. However, if I go to the player two side, as you can see, I'm so much slower. If I try to do it fast, sometimes it will come out, sometimes it will not. So in this instance, like the fireball came out. So learning this for me, and you are not willing to spend weeks learning a hitbox controller, this might make you regret buying one. And I promise you something, like when you're first trying to learn it, this middle finger of yours, it will hurt because you're not really used to moving it. Those two fingers, you eventually get like used to using them all of the time. But this one, it feels so stiff when you're trying to use it for the like for the first time. And for me, this is the biggest hindrance or biggest disadvantage actually for using a hitbox, that it requires a lot of time to actually get good using a hitbox. I don't know, maybe some other players are better than me, but this is my own experience actually. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely let me know what do you think about the Hitbox controller. If you're a Hitbox user, just give me some tips in the comment section. Help me learn how to use this thing. And if you want to buy Hitbox, tell me like what are your expectations from buying one. From my impressions, I am very happy. And I recommend it if you are willing to put the time and effort in learning this. Because I feel like a lot of things that I used to struggle with an arcade stick, particularly defense, I eliminated this problem here. And I feel like if I put the time and energy to learn this and master the movement and develop like the fingers dexterity to like to move, to schmove like they say with this one, I feel like I will get so much better like as a player. And since this doesn't really require me to do like motions, I am less likely to fail once I learn how to do the proper ones, because it's just like a button sequence process. And what I really like about hitboxes in general is you can buy them either like really thick, big chunky boys, or you can buy like lighter ones that are easy to carry and travel with actually. And again, Henry, thank you so much for giving this for me. I am so happy to own a hitbox actually. And for me, again, if you are willing to commit and put the time and effort and you're moving from a regular controller or this big chunky boy arcade stick, I am recommend this. Just keep something in mind that you need to put some time and effort into learning this. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to join our Discord community. I stream every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Link in the description box below. And I'll catch you next video. Yalla, peace.